Hello guys and gals and welcome. Welcome. So today we're going to be talking about a spirit gem known as Blasphemy. Blasphemy is kind of interesting. It's expensive. Well, let me say that. It's actually very expensive. It is a spirit gem that allows you to use a curse and turn it into a socketed skill in the actual ability, which applies as an aura instead, which is really cool. Applying their effects to any monster that is nearby, essentially as a aura. Now, supported curses have 42% less magnitude, so they are less effective than they would otherwise normally be. So you're not getting like the full damage or the full effect of the curses. And they also, of course, cost 60 spirit per socketed curse. On top of this, if you have things that like function with multipliers, there are some things that can increase the cost of the curse if you socket them in with the curse. Things that specifically affect the curses, like adding in extra like size of the curse or magnitude of the curses. Some things can increase the overall cost of how much spirit it's costing you by essentially multiplying the spirit cost, so you do have to be careful of that. It does have a 10% increased reservation efficiency, and if we take a look at the special benefit, socketed curses have 20% increased magnitudes from the Gemling Legionnaire special bonus for quality. Now, what curses can you put into Blasphemy? Well, there's a lot of curses. There's actually a pretty healthy amount of curses for some reason, although there used to be a lot more, and they kind of like refine them down because, well, they're just kind of too many. So first off, we've got the Contagion, which is afflict a single target with a debuff that deals chaos damage over time. If the enemy dies while affected by the Contagion, it spreads itself, curses, and other chaos damage and other time debuffs on the target to nearby enemies. That refreshes the duration, reanimating and detonating corpses. I believe this one works. We can always just check it. Enfeeble is one that makes targets deal less damage to you, which is really nice. So basically just lowers the overall damage output against you. Elemental weakness is really good because it inflicts elemental resistance negative. So you can essentially have a permanent negative elemental resistance on any monster that's within range of you. You can also use temporal chains, which slows down monsters and makes them, obviously, it's kind of like Holy Freeze from Diablo 2, which is really good. We also have vulnerability, which inflicts negative armor on any target that you're attacking. So you can basically just strip armor from the targets. Although the amount of negative armor is going to depend on the monster's armor itself, whether or not you're stripping all that armor off the target. So very good for physical builds. We also have Despair, which the curse applies after 1.5 seconds. Curse afflicts negative 47% chaos resistance, which is good if you're running a chaos build. And then we also have, I believe it's Hex Blast is also a curse. No, this one detonates curses, so not quite the same thing. But basically, you have a bunch of curses that you can potentially socket in, and you can even socket more than one curse, but you do have to increase your total number of curses allowed. So there are ways that you can potentially do that if you type in curse. And you look for things like this one right here, which you can apply an additional curse, but you have double activation delay of curses. There also are items that can give you additional curses as well. You just have to pay attention to them. Now, curse magnitude can, of course, increase the overall effectiveness of the curse. So if you're looking for like a 10% increased curse magnitude, this will, of course, give you increased curse magnitude. You also, since this is technically an aura, abilities that increase auras can also help you as well. So, like, you can essentially get aura magnitude. Well, that's banner skills. 30% increased presence area of effect, and aura skills have 6% increased magnitudes. This would also technically work since Blasphemy counts as an aura. Most of the time, when you're dealing with this sort of thing, it's actually your presence, which is calculating how far the aura goes. So if I find an item real quick here, hold on. Yeah, I'll just find something that has presence on it. Here we go. So if you have any item that has presence on it, you can clearly see this. So we're going to go ahead and hold our mouse over the presence, and you can see an actual visual circle of the presence area of effect, right? Which allows us to know exactly how far the curse is going. And I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if it actually states it here about the size of the aura. Aura buffs apply to enemies within a radius, or debuffs to enemies within a radius of the source aura. But we can go ahead and we can play around with this. So let's go into a map, and I currently have mine set up with Repulsion. Repulsion is one of the things that is not on that skill panel, and this is because it's one of the new Calgaran skills specifically. But Repulsion does count as a curse, and it can also be applied to Blasphemy, which is what I'm currently doing right now. I'm utilizing Repulsion in a way that is complementary to Bone Cage, so that I can essentially use it to strip the damage mod off of the target, essentially, right? So I'm putting Blasphemy Repulsion on the target, and then I'm stripping it off with Bone Cage, and it's being reapplied, and it works surprisingly well. But let me go ahead and go into a map real quick. Doesn't really matter where we go. And when you walk within range of a monster, what you'll notice is that they immediately get the curse above their head. And you can, of course, utilize that curse for whatever means you need to. With Repulsion, it actually applies a damage mod to the targets, allowing me to do additional damage explosions, essentially, to any monster within the curse radius. It can be extremely useful for tons of builds, either using it for just simply reducing an enemy resistances or stripping off their armor. You can utilize it to slow monsters down if you want to, or cause them to do less damage. You can treat it like a Holy Freeze aura, and you can just have all the monsters go much slower than they would normally go, giving you more time to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. I actually have a kind of a theory craft for a character in my brain here, where I was thinking of potentially using like Spirit Stacking and Blasphemy together to try and get like a crazy build, kind of designed around the idea of stacking curses. Getting like multiple curses like auras around me, and essentially using those like auras or curses to my benefit. And there are ways, of course, that you can get damage out of curses. There's ways that you can get defensiveness out of curses, and so forth and so on. And of course, if the monster's not hitting you, then you die a lot less because the monster's much slower, and it's easier to avoid their attacks and in general, right? So you could essentially stack together multiple curses if you had the ability to. Like, Blasphemy can socket multiple curses, but you do have to have the ability to use multiple curses, right? And then you can also stack Curse Magnitude. So Curse Magnitude is something that you can stack on the board, and you can increase the effectiveness of your curses, which you can see I get Curse Magnitude here. There's also Curse Magnitude here. We can get like several wheels of Curse Magnitudes in various places that can, of course, increase. You can also get Curse Magnitude on items as well. So if you search for Curse Magnitude, you'll find that you can get Curse Magnitude on rings. You can get Curse Magnitude, I believe, on unique items too. Let me double check. Yes, there's Curse Magnitude on unique items as well. So we've got things like the Shackles of the Wretched. And if you wanted to stack as much Curse Magnitude as possible, that's definitely something that you could do. Now, what does Curse Magnitude give you overall? Well, it's going to increase, obviously, the effectiveness of the curse. In the case of Repulsion, it's probably going to increase its damage. In the case of some of the other curses that we were talking about earlier, if we go ahead and just type in curses again, you're obviously going to get things like more slowing effectiveness of Temporal Chains, slowing the monsters even more than they're normally slowed. Which, of course, you could combine this together with chilling effects and other types of slows to stack it even further. Vulnerability, you're going to get more armor, negative armor out of it, which, of course, is going to make it easier for you to deal with physical damage. Like if you're like me and you have a Bone Cage, which is a physical damage spell, or you're utilizing any physical damage abilities, or like you have even the other curse active, which is Repulsion. Vulnerability would work really good with Repulsion because it would strip the armor from the target before you're doing the physical damage, right? So you could have like 2 curses on the target at a time. Elemental Weakness is, of course, very good if you're running an elemental build and you want to strip resistances from the target. If you can get enough penetration, which is a different stat, penetration down to 0%, then elemental resistances essentially becomes a multiplier at that point, giving you a rather large increase in damage on any target that has their resistances stripped, right? So increasing your magnitude here would, of course, increase the amount of negative resistance that you're getting, which is really nice. Same thing with Despair, which is chaos resistance. That's going to give you a large amount of increased chaos resistance, negative. And then, of course, you also have Enfeeble, which is targets deal 28% less damage. So this one is going to make it so that the monsters obviously are hitting you softer, right? Little baby hits. You know, like I roll to attack the orc on the cliff, and I roll a 1. You caress the orc's back gently, and he is uncomfortable. I mean, basically having stuff like this in here could make your character extremely tanky. Like if you ran Enfeeble and Temporal Chains together, and you also were on a cold character that can chill targets, I mean, that would potentially give you, what, the targets attack way slower, and the targets also deal less damage if they do hit you, and then you chill them as well so they attack even slower again. And maybe you could throw in other things like debilitate and various other types of things like maim and whatnot. And once you throw all those in, who knows, maybe the monsters can't move at all. This kind of build is kind of interesting, but it's also not really the most like crazy thing out there because the monsters generally don't tend to survive very long. In fact, most top end builds can like one shot most monsters. Even bosses can get one shot at the top, right? So having a build that is designed around a defensive mechanic like lowering their damage and decreasing their speed, not quite as amazing. You can also, of course, Hex Blast those curses and get damage out of them, so maybe you just want to have multiple curses on the target and then Hex Blast them to get multiple explosions, right? So, like, it says maximum of 10 explosions per cast, so, you know, there is a limit. But overall, you know, there's definitely some interesting ways that you can potentially utilize the curses to your advantage, including the new Calgaran curse, Repulsion, which is honestly kind of OP. I think that's pretty much it. You do have to be careful about what support gems you throw in there because it can increase the cost of the support, right? So let's take a look at one of the other curses that's not the Calgaran skill. So let's just grab like vulnerability, and let's throw vulnerability in here, and then let's take these out just for the time being. And let's look at some support gem options that you can potentially put into vulnerability, right? So let's go Blasphemy. And we have things like Focus Curse. Supports curse skills, causes them to curse enemies quicker being cast. That's not really what we want. Increased magnitude. So let's try putting increased magnitude in there. So you notice that as soon as we put increased magnitude in here, it turns off Blasphemy. Why is it turning off Blasphemy? It's because Blasphemy is now costing more spirit than it was before. It's costing 84 because this is multiplying the reservation. As you can see, it clearly says cost and reservation multiplier. So this is one of the ones that will increase the reservation of the curses. So you do have to be careful about which ones you put in there because they will multiply the amount of spirit required. And since it's already 60 spirit required per curse, you know, 2 curses would be 120. And if you put in a multiplier, it's going to balloon out the amount required rather dramatically. With the base spirit of your character only being 100, you really only have room for 1 curse without other equipment. So you're going to need spirit on your amulet. You'll need spirit on your armor, maybe spirit on your boots. You'll probably need spirit in a lot of places to be able to get the blasphemy effect that you're looking for. Overall, though, it's a really useful curse, a really useful ability to just automate essentially the cursing process. You could, of course, just simply cast the curses yourself if you want to do that, but this definitely makes it a lot easier for a lot of characters. The only downside to it really is the fact that, well, you know, it's around you in a specific circle. So it's funny, thinking back to Diablo 2, there was a couple characters who were playing like full Fist of the Heavens paladins with the lightning damage and the conviction. And funny enough, like they weren't close enough to the target for the conviction to actually hit. And so they're sitting there trying to kill things and they can't kill anything with their Fist of the Heavens because the Fist of the Heavens is doing lightning damage and they don't actually have the conviction on the target. So one downside to Blasphemy is that you do have to be within essentially range of the monster to be able to apply the curse so that you're getting the effectiveness of the ability. And if you're not within range, well, then you don't get it, right? Which is unfortunate. So if you're a long-range character that doesn't ever like to be in melee range and you're just never applying Blasphemy, well, then Blasphemy as an aura is probably not going to do you very good, if that makes much sense. I think that's pretty much it for Blasphemy. It's a very interesting ability. It does have some complicated use case scenario because it is, of course, multiple different curses can be put in there. You can obviously put more than one curse. You can have all of the different curses active in there, obviously not all at the same time. You can also multiply the way that they work. The magnitude decrease is actually kind of a downside, a big downside, but for the most part, automating the curse is actually a massive bonus to most characters, because it just makes it so that you don't have to sit there and curse the monster and then attack the monster. Instead, you can just run up, apply your aura to the monster, and then attack them directly, right? Of course, it's not always, these curses are not always the best way to do things, right? So like, I'm not using the armor one. I'm using the armor break one, right? So I'm armor breaking the monsters instead, which is how I'm particularly doing this build. So instead of getting the the armor break curse, I'm just simply going the traditional route and breaking armor myself, which is honestly just better. And instead I'm using Repulsion for extra damage output, which is surprisingly effective. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you are enjoying the content. And as always, keep watching.